Hello and welcome to the Calendar Committee, Board of Education Calendar Committee meeting for October 11th, 2021. My name is Dr. Kevin Cuppett. I'm the Executive Director for Curriculum Instruction and Innovation here in Frederick County Public Schools. And also co-chairing the committee moving forward with me is Dr. Lewis Phillips. I'd like for him to introduce himself, please.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Eric Loris Phillips here. I'm the Acting Executive Director of Public Affairs. Thank you for letting me join you.
Just as an etiquette reminder, remember if you're not speaking to remember to mute your microphone so that reduces background noise. And I do appreciate the little hand raising feature in a Google Meet. It's down in the center of your controls. If you need to ask a question or interrupt, that way it'll keep the recording nice and clean for us. So the first thing I'd like to do is we sent you the minutes from the January 11th, 2021 meeting. And I'm looking for someone to offer approval of those meeting minutes. Mike Benitsky?
Yeah, I'd like to move approval. I had one question. Was I a member in January since I'd been voted off the board? They say I was absent.
You know, I'm not sure. Mike, I'll have to look at the record and see. You're always a member with me, Mr. Benitsky. Always a member with me.
You're very kind. Then I move approval. Looking for a second.
Second for approval? Okay, Missy Dirks by raise of hand. All right. Any discussion about changes to the minutes, or do we have a motion, or do we have a vote to approve them all? By hand, please. Jeremy and Laura by voice, please. Okay.
Approved.
All right. And Jennifer, are you raising hands to vote, or do you have a question? Raising hands by vote. Okay. All right. So we've approved those minutes. The first, and there was no public comment today, and Rhonda, you can correct me if anything has come in just recently, but I did want the committee to be aware that I did have a citizen reach out and ask questions. We get this almost annually about the schools being closed on either Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. And I reminded the citizen that we don't pick those days because they are religious holidays. We pick those days because of if we were to attend school in those days, the impact to student attendance and staff attendance might impair the functioning of the system. Because those would be days that we anticipate we'd have a high absence rate. So I had that conversation in email exchange, but I did want to make sure the committee was aware of that type of conversation that came in. It did not come in through the normal public comment route, but rather a direct communication to me. So our first order of business is to review the proposed 23-24 calendar. And when I read the minutes from the meeting that we just approved, in number 3, there was the statement that says the committee identified additional changes to be made to the calendar. That was in your January 11 meeting. And it says Mr. Boffman recorded the changes to the calendar and will redistribute to the committee members for further review. Now, I did receive a calendar. What I would like for you to do, because you all were at the meeting and Dr. Lewis Phillips and I were not, is to just double check to make sure the things that were discussed during that meeting actually made it to print, so to speak, in the calendar. So what I would like to do is if you've had an opportunity to look it over, if there's anything that you think may have gotten missed as we transition the committee, I'd love to hear about those things. And it looks like we have a hand up from, I'm not sure who that is. Is that Jeremy? No, I'm sorry. It's Dana, not unknown.
Unknown. I noticed on the draft that it's a 2-hour early dismissal for Fair Day, but I think this past year we had a 3-hour. I don't know if that was an oversight or intentionally. I missed that last meeting. So just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention just in case.
Great. Thank you, Dana. Does anybody recall clarification or conversation around that? Jeremy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think in the notes from the January meeting, a lot of the things that were just making sure that the version that was printed had the things on the right days. There was discrepancies about the number. And with Dana, with the Fair Day, the plan was to do the same as what this year was, as long as this year went well. So this year is done and it went well. So I think it is meant to be the same.
Does anybody have any questions about what I'm hearing from Jeremy is if we go fair day to a, instead of a 2-hour early dismissal, I believe it was a 3.5-hour early dismissal this year. Is there consensus amongst the group here that that would be what you would put forward? Missy?
It does beg the question of what that time is. A 2-hour early dismissal is delineated in the contract as teacher work time, and there's guidelines for that. The 3.5-hour dismissal for fair day this year did cause quite a bit of confusion. I think we've done it once now, so we could do it again. So that to me isn't limiting, but the confusion was, so who's directing us? Like, it's not delineated. There's nothing in the contract because it doesn't count as one of the professional days that's delineated in the contract that CII or school-based admin direct. It's not governed by the 2-hour early dismissal, which is teacher directed. So there was a lot of confusion in some schools over, wait, are we off too? Or the kid, like, who, because it isn't, that type of dismissal is not delineated in the contract. So I think we've done it now, so people will have a better idea of, and it is administratively or systemically directed, but that's just the only caveat that we need to be clear. And while I know the student calendar handbook is not the teacher work calendar, most staff look at it and see it as that. And that's what caused the confusion.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, Missy. Dana Nardone, unless your hand's just up from earlier.
That was from earlier.
Okay, yeah. So I guess the question I would have from a calendar committee perspective is, do we think it makes more educational sense to do a 3.5-hour early dismissal, or does it make more educational sense to do a 2-hour early dismissal? I think if this group wants to make that decision, the logistics of teacher time and those types of things, as Missy was outlining, staff could work with the association on that at a later time. Does anybody want to weigh in on whether or not, it sounded like from your previous meeting, you wanted it to remain the same if it had gone well. And I get Jeremy, from the going well perspective, did you mean from teachers' perception of the time or family's perception of the dismissal to be ready to go to the fair?
I just felt that it wasn't a big, huge public upheaval from anybody. So, and that's my bar for going well, is that there weren't like 1,000 things on social media and the news post about how awful it was. Low bar.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, Ms. Barrett.
Do you have the absences that day? Because I think I can anticipate that question being asked by some of my friends. Because I think that would sort of be part of that going well definition.
So whether or not it was typical or atypical absence on that day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I could see your colleagues definitely asking that question. So I'll make sure we have that prior to the presentation, Ms. Barrett.
Another thing to think about is we had a 2-hour early dismissal the day before. So I think some people might have thought take a long weekend out Thursday. So that's a kind of a weird thing that happened this year.
Yeah. So do I appear to have consensus to leave it as is now for presentation to the board, and then the board can have a discussion around that? If you could have a nod of heads that you're okay with leaving it as the 3.5-hour early dismissal and not the 2-hour early dismissal that's stated here. So I'll make a correction to the calendar. Okay.
Kevin, can I make a comment? I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Thank you,
okay.
Christine.
So I know from the ag community, this kind of echoes what Jeremy was saying. The ag community felt like it was a good compromise. So I just think it promotes some goodwill in an area that typically will come to our Board of Education meetings and talk about the need to have fair day off.
Thank you, Dr. Pearl. Appreciate that connection to the ag community that you have. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that there was not a lot of public conversation about that. So that was a good, as you said, compromise with our participation in the fair. All right. Were there any other items in the calendar that we felt we needed to take note of based on your recollection of what you wanted to present to the board? Dana Nardone and then Miss Barrett. If you would go down in the center and click that little hand, there you go. All right, Miss Barrett.
I think I hit all the right buttons. The starting August 9th, I know you're going to explain all this, but I was confused a little bit about the alignment with the FCC, because then it starts before FCC. And I think having a reason, sharing the reason for that, I think will be useful. I think having read a lot of board email this year about start date, there was just a lot of questions about why are we starting so early? Why are we starting so early? So I think typically that's a FCC conversation and alignment of the academic calendars, but I was just a little confused when I saw it starting before FCC even, unless I've misunderstood the calendar. Yeah. And I am just showing up here for the first time, so please don't, spend a lot of time trying to go back and explain a lot of history to me. So,
thank you, Ms. Barrett. Jeremy, then Michael, and then Melissa. Missy, sorry.
Speaking to what Ms. Barrett talked about, I think it's important that we think about the way we approached planning the calendar was backward mapping. So getting the end of the FCC and the end of our first semester lining up, and then backward mapping. And it's a lot easier to fill with preparation for doing a dual enrollment course beforehand. Like this year, the FCC courses, we had a couple days of FCPS instruction before they began. And I know dual enrollment teachers did some onboarding activities, getting kids used to using Blackboard and things like that, so they can really start the semester running without having to do those teaching how to use it things as part of the course itself. And then also thinking ahead to AP testing. If you look at starting with that earlier August date, if you look at those, I think it's like 70 some days if we start then, that we allow kids to have instruction for a spring AP program, which is I think the most we've had since I can remember starting semesterized block scheduling as far as spring semester days to get kids ready for those high stakes tests. So I think in looking at how to get people to understand it, much like when you're teaching, you're backward mapping. Where do you want to end up? And you have to backward map from there to where you have to start.
Thank you, Jeremy. Michael?
Yes, Liz, I'm just going to echo what Jeremy said. Is when we started this 3 years ago, we had to look at progressive. So this is the culmination of a 3-year calendar. So it's moved back in increments. And as Jeremy said, we had to backward map from when we start our winter break. And FCC does not have to put in as many days off as we do, both for state required and contractually necessary for our school system. They have 15 weeks they have to get in before the winter break. We have 90 days we have to get in, and then add on the professional days. And so incrementally over the big picture, 3 years, this is the one that finally gets us to finish the semester prior to the winter break. The other calendars hadn't done that. And this starts on the 9th, which I was surprised. I thought we would end up having to start on August 1, which is where I started advocating 2 years ago, much to these people's dismay. And this is where we end up. So just echoing what Jeremy had to say, and I'll leave the rest to Missy.
Yeah, Missy, before you go, for those folks that may not have been in the conversation 2 years ago, the original proposal put forward for this year's calendar that we're in, and for next year's calendar actually had next year, 22-23, starting at around that August 9th or 10th. And at the time, the board decided to send back to the committee to have it start later, So we'll actually have this year and next year with what I call that mid-August start. And so now this calendar, as Mr. Benitsky is saying, is getting to the culmination of what we had intended to do for 22-23. And we'll just now do it we'll propose it to the board in 23-24. Missy?
Thanks. And I just wanted to add on to what, yes to everything they said, but it isn't just high school. Our middle schools and our elementary schools have MCAP testing or whatever iteration they're going to call it on any given year. It's not going away because it's in the federal law. And so it gives more instructional days prior to all of the testing, so no matter what level you're at, no matter if you're semesterized or not, and this calendar has us, again, ending at winter break, which means the kids would really go home and have no homework, which I know is not a thing at elementary and middle. Don't usually send homework over winter break, but if you have AP kids, they've got homework over winter break. And then we're done by Memorial Day. And so that's one of the things I know a lot of people who are like, this year's calendar started really early and we all felt the crunch after last year. But when the very beginning of June hits and we're done, that's when I think it'll be interesting to get the feedback when people really have had a full year of that. And if we're done by Memorial Day, which most of the South follows that kind of schedule, a little bit earlier start, but everybody's done by Memorial Day because it lines up with all of the state and national testing better.
Dana and then Yvette.
In speaking with some friends over the summer who are bus drivers, they sort of were disappointed in this year's early start because of the heat. They were complaining to me about how hot it is on the buses, how unbearably hot it is. It's not that hot, as it gets later in the year. Being out in May is really great, but there's still cool mornings in May and June as opposed to just the unbearable heat that early in August. And so I just that came from a couple different bus driver friends. So I wanted to just throw that out there for everyone to consider.
Thank you very much, Dana. Yvette?
Hi, everyone. I noticed that on this calendar, and I missed the last meeting. I apologize for that, and it was probably discussed. But I noticed that here, the start day, there's only 4 teacher planning days prior to school starting. Was there a reason for that? When we normally have 5?
I'm assuming, Jeremy, you want to cover that?
Well, correct me. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, couple.
Jeremy, you accidentally muted yourself.
We have not always had 5 at the start of school. It's varied over different years. And I think part of that was, didn't we put one back in the middle of the year on this new calendar to give that curricular thing as well?
We did, Jeremy. You're absolutely right. We put it back in at winter break. So it's up against it is January. I mean, at the start of term 3. So it gives that curricular day back in the middle of the year. We used to have one in January, and then it was moved to February, and then it was moved to the beginning of the year. So that's what happened.
Yeah, that's to help with the semester change.
Thank you for that.
And for those of you that may not recall, the reason it got pushed to the beginning of the year was because of the post-Labor Day start contracted the calendar so much that the calendar committee could not fit in all 180 days if they had those days. I do want to point out, if you guys look at the calendar, on October 20th, it says Teacher Professional Learning Day, which I assume means, Missy, those curricular days, right? Teacher Professional Learning Day. The January one was stated as Teacher Professional Work Day, and I think we need to clarify that to be a Teacher Professional Learning Day, so that isn't confused with an actual, like an end of the term work day. Does that seem like a reasonable change?
Yeah, you're right. My guess is that management would choose to make the October 1 the FPT day, like we've been doing the past several years, so that teachers can take advantage of all those different state, like the state math association has their workshops that day, a lot of people. And then, yes, there's a work day in January, and then followed by the professional day, which would be systemically directed.
Jeremy, is your hand back up?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify what Missy said. There's 2 days in January at the semester change. One's the work day for end of term 2, and one's like a professional work day or professional D day for change of semester.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy. All right. So are there any other points of clarification in the calendar before we talk about the Board of Education presentation? Christine Pearl.
And I would just like to share from my curricular colleagues that having a day in January is extremely beneficial when we're switching terms and we're able to meet with teachers to clarify any curricular changes. So from the curriculum department, they all thank you immensely and hope that that stays in.
Thank you, Christine. Great point, especially when we're resetting for second semester in the high schools, right? It's often when we run a lot of our new courses, and having a day to get ready for that is definitely helpful. All right, so we're gonna move to breakout rooms. Raise your hand if you have not done breakout rooms before in Google Meet. So this would be the equivalent of us breaking up into small groups if we were in person. There are going to be digital spaces called breakout rooms. You're going to be assigned to those randomly. What I would like to do is take the presentation that we do for the board and just have groups independently basically check the count and the math. So there are several slides in here that I'd like for you to give attention to. They are slides number 9, 10, and then it skips to 13 and 14. You'll see on the actual, it's written on the actual upper left side of the slide. So slide 9, 10, and then 13, 14. What I'm looking for is to make sure that small groups can verify that we've put this information in accurately. I use a file save as of each presentation every year. So we just want to go through and lay a lot of eyes on this to double check for quality control before we go to the board. So what will happen is you will leave this, what is called the main room, and you will appear in another Google Meet with maybe 2 or 3 friends. If you don't know each other, please introduce yourself. And then if you can go through the presentation, compare it against the calendar, and double check the information and look for any errors. And then I'll bounce. Well, I may not be able to bounce. At some point, we will leave the groups. I think it should probably take us about maybe 15 minutes to do this at the most. But you also, at the end, if your group is finished, you can actually say, leave the breakout room, and it'll bring you back into the main room. All right. So we're going to give this a whirl. Any questions or clarifications about what you're asked to do? Dana Barlow.
Is slide 11 and 12 intentionally omitted?
So what it is I hid slides from the previous presentation. If you remember the last time I did this, I presented 2 different academic calendars. If you remember, so now we're only doing one. So I just backed out some information, and then I'll change the slide numbers once we publish the board docs. Okay. All right. So Wanda, if you could open up, let's do 1, 2, 3. Let's do 3 breakout groups. And so divide us into 3 smaller groups. And again, please introduce yourself if there's somebody you don't know when you get there. And as soon as Wanda sets that up, all of a sudden we're going to disappear. You're going to start flying through cyberspace. So hold on to your hats, folks. Wanda, is it coming up okay? Yeah, there we go. Hey, Wanda, are you there?
Yeah.
If you can you see where you can join the breakout rooms?
Mm-hmm.
Can you go in and just check and see how much more time people need?
Okay.
Okay. Just a reminder for folks here, this is still being recorded. We'll have Wanda go check on the other groups and reconvene the group here in a minute to close out for the day.
Excellent. Can I ask a question? Does my name, sorry, does my
Christine,
name say Christine Pearl or Dr. Christine Pearl?
It just says Christine Pearl.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I just happened to have noticed recently a lot of people have been referring to me as doctor when I come in, so I didn't know if, since for me it just says you, so
Okay.
I didn't know. I didn't mean to be ostentatious or anything.
Yeah, no
I
worries.
had no idea mine was unknown because it says you.
As we wait for the remainder of the breakout groups coming in, just a reminder that the meeting is still being recorded.
I noticed as we were leaving to come back, Wanda was joining ours, but we all hit the button to come back to the meeting just as she did that.
I'm sure that won't hurt her feelings.
I hope not. Oh, now she's back.
They're going to take the full 15 minutes, so another 5-7 minutes.
We saw
Okay,
you join ours, Wanda.
You guys,
we were leaving.
on me, yeah.
So if you want, you can certainly turn off your camera and do other things while we wait for the last group to join us and the meeting to proceed.
Mike, it's great to see you. I know we're being recorded, but I just wanted to let you know it's nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Eric. Congratulations again on
Thanks.
the new position. I know you're going to do wonderful for FCPS, and it'll be great for you to be learning about this and moving ahead. It's a great opportunity for you, but more for us.
That's kind of you. I appreciate it. I'm learning a lot. It's a great team for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure you're learning a lot. I'm not sure about the great stuff, but because you're in a position, you're the pincushion for all the stuff that comes in. And then you have to make it sound good when you send it out so that we look good. And we appreciate that.
Well, not a problem. The PA team, though, was phenomenal. I'm very fortunate. Yeah.
I know that's been a real blessing. Those guys just are really good. They're all good. All of the and there's so few of them to do all the work that they do.
Yeah,
it's another one of those areas like in curriculum,
right,
where
you do amazing things with one or two people.
you really can do a lot of amazing things that you don't think you have to do or could do, but you end up doing anyway.
Exactly. I look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yeah, we got to get together.
Yep.
Okay. Christine, you look great, doctor.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You had a good year?
Yes, so far. Not
Okay.
without its stresses, but
Well, yeah, it's a weird year.
it's a very weird year.
This
Yes.
has been really interesting to watch.
Yes.
And no offense to anyone, but I'm really kind of glad that I'm on the outside looking in. You keep smiling, Kevin.
We are certainly doing our best to support our schools.
Oh, I know that. Oh, God, I know that. You always did. That's not new. It's just harder.
Amen. So while the other group's finishing up, I think what we can do is just hear from each group about any adjustments or changes that they wanted to make to the presentation. And when the third group gets back, we'll hear from them. And I can share what our group looked at. We did do an accuracy check. The only change we made was on slide 9. Instead of it saying 2-hour early dismissal for a fair day, it'll say the 3.5-hour early dismissal that we discussed earlier. And we also recommended adding, until the state clears up whether virtual snow days can actually happen, we recommended adding 2 more built-in snow days at the end of the calendar. Right now they are 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. And we're also recommending that we add the 28th and the 29th, with, we believe, the 27th being Memorial Day. Got to double check that. As the state tries to figure out how they're going to handle virtual snow days in the coming year. And then on slide 14, Mr. Brown noted that actual AP assessments do not begin until the first full week of May. So that gave us an additional 2 days. If we go all the way to May 6th, 2 days of instruction. And so instead of saying 75 days, it'll say 77 now. So that's even a few more that we eked out.
Yeah, we were unclear about that one. I looked online and they only went to 22. I couldn't find 24.
Yeah, so we'll just, when I share with the board, Mr. Benitsky, I'll just indicate that our understanding, it'll be the first full week of May. And so we counted this number up until that date. So 77 full days of instruction prior to, which is considerably, 20 extra instructional days prior to the start of an assessment from 2020, 2021.
Hey, Kevin, I'm not going to do that math in my head, but what does that change that percentage increase to?
I
don't want you to do it either. I just put a note to myself for that one.
Yeah, thank you. Change percent too. Okay. All right. Does somebody want to report from the other group?
I took notes. I guess I can say something.
Okay.
So we thought about adding where it says 27 full weeks. We thought about putting in there of how many actual weeks there are, because we were talking about how some of the weeks we can't give full weeks because of holidays and things like that. So we thought maybe we could say 27 weeks of 39 weeks. And then instead of 4 with 2 hourly dismissal, just say 4 with early dismissal, because the one is a 3.5 hours. And then,
Jennifer, and we're sure it's 27 of 39 total weeks that have school.
That's what Mike said, right?
Yeah.
It was 39. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And there are 6 4-day weeks that we can't have a full 5-day week because of President's Day, Martin Luther King's birthday, professional leave that we've given on a Friday, but they're 4 days in contiguous. So the contiguous education is continuing, which was one of the charges.
And Mike, wasn't it 7 weeks because of the election this year?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Early election made it 7.
Mm-hmm.
Primary.
And then also on slide 9, the second semester begins January 4th. We thought adding 4 students would be good, so that people don't think that that's just teachers. It's also the students on the 4th.
Great. I love that. 4 students begins January 4th. And just back real quick, I could certainly mention verbally the 7, we're saying that we have 27 of our 39 weeks have 5 days in them. 4 of those have an early dismissal somewhere in them. But of the remaining weeks, 7 of those are 4-day weeks, and they're weeks that we couldn't have made 5-day weeks if we tried, is what I'm hearing.
Right.
Correct.
Because of the holiday. Yes.
Or
whatever.
contractual requirements.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that's a great way to say that.
And then let's see here. The other, you already said the early dismissal, 3.5 hours. We already changed that. And then on slide 13, can you change the second column? We didn't want to go that far into the future, so we could just do 2021.
It says
Wait, I'm
20.
not
It says 2021 too.
20,200.
We all are going to be around here by then.
I vote we do not go that far ahead. Thank you. That's
Exactly.
excellent.
I think that might be a problem.
All
And then
right.
I think that was all of ours, wasn't it? I think so.
Okay. All right. So we will wait for the remaining group to join us, and we'll continue with that conversation. Dr. Pearl.
I just wondered, because there's a lot of people that have done this historically, when did we change from including the snow days to not including the snow days? Melissa knows. Okay.
Well, it's kind of a loaded question because they are kind of included when we do. If you look at the day counts for term 3 is longer than term 2. And that's because we assume the snow days are actually, some snow days are actually going to fall in there. And so that way students don't get shorted their 45 days. So really they kind of are included in that count when we do the count that way. The snow days have swung from 3 to 5 to 8 to 5
Right.
to 3 to, and prior the calendar committee has been in existence for like 10 or 12 years. Prior to that, HR did the calendar and presented it to the board. It didn't have as broad of community input, and so I'm not sure what they did then.
Well, I've had a couple of conversations with people, and we've talked about the June 1st end of school. And I've said, but that doesn't include if we have snow days. And people are like, oh, no, it always includes. So there does seem to be a little bit of confusion surrounding that.
It is on the calendar. And I know I agree with you. I know plenty of people that automatically back them out and then say, this is the end date. And I was like, no, automatically include them and be happy when we get out earlier and not upset when we get out.
Better plan to be here, because you're that, from a work requirement and from a student requirement as well. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a mind shift.
Right.
Yeah.
So it looks like our third group is returned. The first two groups have already reported back. Who would like to be the spokesperson for group number 3 returning to the fold?
I nominate Mr. Barlow.
Ha! Well played, Ms. Baird. Well played. All right, Dana, are you ready to report back on the suggested changes or checks that you did?
I think we all felt the calendar looks really good. There was a question, or not necessarily a question, but something to keep in mind when we were talking about the comparison to the FCC calendar. And I would not be the best person to articulate that.
I can jump in for you, Dana.
Okay. Should I share the screen?
No, I think it's just a general concept.
Okay.
That I can introduce. I don't think anymore that worrying about or considering where the kids get how many days for the AP instruction, it's basically all instruction for the high schools for the semesters, because the assessments now are going to be moving to 20% of the students' grade, right? So we need to make sure that the assessments not only are students getting enough instructional days for AP, but that test window that the state offers needs to be open or wide enough to accommodate every single county's end of semester instruction, right? So if we think that the assessments are going to be given around the last week in each semester, then the window needs to be open during that week. So the point I was trying to make is right now, there's two platforms that are giving the HSAs. The government one starts in December, and the MCAP ones don't start until January 10th or 18th, I believe. So there is a big discrepancy of when the end of course is in the state's eyes. So if our calendar is starting to line up more and more with the college institutions, we need to make sure that they are considering that down the road. I'm not saying it's any change that we need to make, but we need to start advocating right now for those windows to be lining up with all of our end of semesters, not what the average is.
And Debbie, I think that's an important point. And when we presented the first two calendars, back when I had said that the 22-23 calendar, we had that early start. We had informed the board at that time that we would have to work with MSDE to try to get some latitude to be able to administer our assessment under this new calendar. So as idealistic as this approach is from the calendar committee, there's still some bureaucratic things to be taken care of related to testing windows, as Debbie's pointing out. So Debbie, I can make sure that the board is aware of that when I present this information again, so that that's at the forefront of the conversation, because they'll want to have that information, and the intent that in the event that they want to advocate for anything in particular. Jeremy?
Just following up with what Ms. Gilmartin said, I think it's important also to kind of move forward with the fact that MSDE and everybody is always asking the systems to think differently and to think how to better serve our students and educate. And just that same point, we can't think differently if there's no way to do things different from their version. You know, it's gotta, you know, they have to, like she's saying, we need to get support from them that they're going to be able to be flexible. And I think they've shown this year how they've given tests at all different kinds of windows this fall to cover everything online and maintain test security. They're certainly able to do that.
Well, they're also moving to a computer adaptive assessment. So they're not getting intact forms, they're getting forms or items that are dictated on their performance, right? So they should certainly be able to do that.
Exactly.
But if we are in a year right now where we're discussing how that 20% is being implemented and how it's going to attribute to a student's grade, now is the time that we need to start talking about it.
Thank you, Debbie. Dana Nardin?
Related to that, on slide 6, the note at the bottom, it's just a clerical error. The red note proposed will have to change to 23-24.
Excellent. Great catch. Thank you very much. So for the third group that returned, I can tell you the editorial changes that the other two groups are recommending. On slide number 9, it'll say 27 full weeks out of 39 total. And it'll say 4 weeks with an early dismissal, because one of those is not a 2-hour early dismissal, it's the fair day. And verbally, I'll explain to the board that of the remaining weeks that are not 5 days a week, 7 of those are actually 4 days a week, and they couldn't be 5 because of either a holiday that was required or a contractual obligation. The fourth bullet down says second semester for students will begin on January 4th because it starts earlier for teachers. We try to be clear there. And then I'll change the last bullet on slide 9 to 3.5-hour early dismissal on fair day. On slide 10, I'm recommending, and the group, at least the first two groups agreed, to add the 28th and 29th of May as additional snow days built into the calendar until the state figures out whether it's going to accept virtual snow days, which we are exploring with the state of Maryland at this time. On slide 13, there was one clerical error in the second column where it says that the fall FCC end date was December 10 of 20,212, which is a little too far ahead for all of us. And so we've changed that to 2022. And the last slide, 14, that we asked you to look at, we actually calculated the days to be now 77 as we went up to the first full week of May when AP assessments typically start, which, by the way, I've calculated is a 35% increase in instructional time since the 2020-2021 school year. So those are the changes that we have. I thank you for your time. I do want to give the committee heads up. I've done this in my role in the past. Our first step is to then take this into the board to present to them. They'll ask any questions or give any response or feedback at that time. And then they will revisit it at a later meeting to allow some time for it to be out in the public. I don't try to predict what boards do, but they have the option of approving it, as it is. They have the option to approve it with requested changes. And in this year, they probably even have the option to delay on confirming it. As Missy had pointed out earlier, we haven't gotten to the end of this first early calendar yet. Nobody's experienced an early leave yet. So all we'll know is that the next calendar committee, which will officially start after we have one more member approved at the board, which we're going to do in a later meeting. The new calendar committee will then pick up wherever this left off. And I believe that you've gotten back to Wanda Ford about whether you'd like to continue on that committee, and she's kept all that. So I know that we have to add one more person to the roster. So we'll get back to the committee with an update. And I know some of you actually tune into the board meeting to see how the conversation goes. So I did want to, Jeremy?
Just if Wanda could let us know, I think I replied that I wanted to continue, but I'm not sure. So she could just remind us what we said. That'd be great.
Absolutely. We'll send a communication next week. Probably by the end of this week. I keep forgetting it's Monday. Ms. Barrett?
Yeah, just real quick. I think the one of the interesting things is going to be that the board is a fairly new composition, and I think there are members that have not been on the board during the sort of iterative, let's get to this 3-year calendar with the dates that align. So I expect there's going to be a lot of questions. You never know what to expect, but I anticipate there would be a lot of questions really related to that. And I think, explaining that 3-year process and going back and reviewing it, I think is going to be probably a significant part of the questions and conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett. All right. Anything before we part ways here today? Dr. Lewis-Phillips?
I just wanted to thank everybody again. I definitely learned a lot during our short time together, but also wanted to send a quick shout out to Wanda. Thank you, Wanda, for organizing our gathering this evening and for all the communication you've put out. You do a phenomenal job. So I just wanted to extend that appreciation. Thanks.
Thank you all for your time, and everybody have a fantastic evening.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.